Hello, welcome to Lessons After Sessions. I'm Jen.
I'm Trev. Hi, Jen.
Hey, how you doing today?
Well, I'm good. I'm cozy. It's kind of cool outside again, so that's kind of
Love it.
nice.
Yeah, yes it is. Yes it is.
Who do you have there?
So I have Lottie. Lottie is actually my grand dog, but she is just such a sweet girl. So she's in cuddle mode today. So she's going to be my emotional support while we trench through the heavy topic of estrangement today. So
Oh, that's a heavy
Mhm.
topic.
It
Um,
is.
I feel like there's kind of two parts of estrangement.
Mhm.
Or two kinds. You've got the one kind of estrangement where maybe you don't want to be estranged, you don't understand why there's estrangement, um, and it hurts and it's confusing. We have another kind of estrangement, though, where it is self imposed. You have chosen to estrange yourself because someone is so unhealthy and toxic.
Yes.
Um, I feel like there's kind of two different two different types of estrangement. I almost feel like that would take two different podcasts.
Absolutely. Estrangement is one of those things that is so broad. And you're right, there's those two different kinds. And then even within those two different kinds, there's so many different ways that it can look because every family is different, every scenario is different. There's no two that are the same. There's a lot of common threads, but ultimately each situation is different. So I feel like you're right. Two is definitely going to be necessary. Two podcasts is definitely going to help. So which one
Okay.
should we work on today?
Well, okay. So part one of this
Mhm.
two-part estrangement series. Um, You brought the topic up, so I'll kind of let you start. Maybe we start with the estrangement where you yourself didn't initiate it, possibly don't want it, confused by it. It's something that has occurred, and you're kind of left with what is this about? Why is this occurring? Why doesn't this person want me in their life?
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of use my own experience to kind of start off this conversation. And um, there's every family has issues, and mine is no exception. And I have a family member who chose to remove themselves from the family and placed a lot of blame and a lot of anger and hatred towards other members of the family for perceived wrongs. And they kind of came to a
Ah,
position.
perceived wrongs. Sorry to
Yes,
interrupt, but that's important. Okay.
it is. It is. So along the journey, kind of, there was a lot of interesting kind of things that came up for me, which is how do I recognize that within myself that this person had kind of the upper hand in the family dynamic, meaning that I felt like myself and other family members were really bending to try to appease them, even to the
Okay.
point where okay, I'm kind of letting my boundaries become soft because I really want this person to be a part of our family. And I also recognized that the more that that happened, the more that they became kind of offensive towards other family members because they became more powerful. The more that the
Mhm.
boundaries became loose, the more that they pushed. There was also a lack of communication in a lot of ways where things would happen and there would be assumptions as to why or how those things happened, but there was never a
Yes.
healthy communication as to what really did. It was always kind of we always felt like we were running around this person trying to make them happy. And in the end, they chose to remove themselves and from the family and estranged from other from the rest of the family. And it really, hindsight, I recognize so much. I recognize that I became very confused about who I was and what I stood for, because that was made to be it was all manipulated to where I was the problem, and as we know, there's never one person 100% that's the problem, like, it's a back and forth. Sometimes you just
Yes.
can't appease another person, but when you're being attacked as if you're the only one, I think that's always kind of a little bit of a red flag, but I it left me completely and the rest of my family just drained. Like, "What just happened here? What did we just what just happened?" And it's heartbreaking and it's so hard because these are, someone that we've loved dearly, supported dearly. So there's so many different levels to it. I think being on the flip side of that, I recognize the the destruction because there's a lot of grief. So the destruction that's
Absolutely.
left behind, the grief, grieving someone who's alive is really, really hard. Um, so there's just a lot of different levels to it. And I think the biggest one that comes up for me, and I'm kind of going to ask you about some kind of to weigh in on this is the boundary piece. I think a lot of times what happens is there's a push and a push and a push. And then in order to continue to salvage the relationship, you just eliminate boundaries or you make them so loose that they don't even barely exist because I'll do anything to keep this person in my life. And then
Yes.
it becomes very toxic. And so at what point do you allow that person to say, I've had enough, they're estranging themselves. At what point do you say, okay, okay,
Mhm. Okay. That is such an important piece because when you don't want the estrangement, so in your family, this example,
mhm,
um, making all kinds of accommodations just to have that person back in your life, back in events, those boundaries do get so loose. And typically, the person who has loosened those boundaries so much gets disappointed anyway. So
mhm,
now they're feeling badly because they've loosened boundaries and they didn't get the end result they were hoping for in the end. I
mhm,
think it's important to know your boundaries when someone has said, "Okay, I don't want to be a part of your life in this family. I'm not coming over to birthdays. Don't call me. I'm not coming to Christmas," whatever it is.
mhm,
I think you have to really search yourself and know, okay, or evaluate, have I done everything I can do to extend the olive branch, to attempt in a healthy way to still have this person in my life?
mhm,
If I have, in healthy ways, and they still aren't responsive, I think that's where you have to really evaluate what boundaries do I need? What boundaries do I need to tighten up? Because I can't just be loosey goosey with this person.
mhm,
I still have to have some self respect. I still, I know what's healthy, and the way they're communicating is not healthy. I'm
yeah,
not going to then begin to engage in that unhealthy communication
mhm.
just to have a piece of this person, even if it is my child, my mom, my dad, my brother, whoever it is.
Yeah. And I think that the boundary thing is a really interesting piece of it because what I've recognized is it became to where throughout the course of kind of what ended up becoming this person leaving and saying, "I'm done," there was a lot of lowering of boundaries, but that just made it worse because
Mhm.
then there was just no respect, and then the relationship became very transactional. It was not based on unconditional love. It was not based on family ties. It was based on, "What can you do for me? And if you can't do that for me, then I'm walking." And so then there was this piece of like, well, I don't want you to go. So what do you need? What can I do? But then they would receive that. And then there would be, in the goalpost kept moving. Right. And so then it
Mhm.
made me, that's when I took a step back and thought, wow, this is about as unhealthy as it can be. If this person, we have to put a foot down and say no more because it wasn't a healthy relationship. So the relationship that we were trying so desperately to hold on to didn't even really exist. And that
Wow.
was the part that I think
Wow.
had to really be addressed.
Do you find that people who have experienced estrangement from a family member or a friend uh, in a situation where they don't really understand why it's happened, do you
Mhm.
find that the person who has pulled away is usually struggling to be healthy themselves? Do you find that they often have more going on than just, "We've had a disagreement. I don't agree with mom on this decision. I'm mad at my sister for this." Do you feel like there's kind of more going on there?
A lot of times, very much so. And I think it roots back. Families are a little bit, well, they're not a little bit, they're incredibly complex. And so, and when we talk about estrangement, it's almost generally speaking within a family system.
Right,
Um,
right.
and what I do see a lot within my own life and then within the people that I work with who are working through estrangement is for one, right now, this cancel culture that's kind of a thing is, well, if it's not working for me, I'm out. And I
Yes.
think, wow, that's heavy because that in and of itself is a red flag. If you're able to discard lifelong relationships because it's not working for you, because something didn't turn out the way you wanted to, or because you've held on to a grudge from early childhood
Yeah.
and
If you
made
have
it
the
that
ability to do that, there's
yes.
some disconnect within you.
Yes. And that I see a lot of. Well, now hindsight, I'm looking back and this, and this, I was failed as a child. 100%. I'm here to tell you, I am a parent and a step parent, and I have failed all three of my children. It's impossible not to.
Me too. Yes.
So, I think there's this huge piece of that of being able to have some sort of empathy and compassion. It's so complicated because as a person who's being estranged from, I think you also have the responsibility to own your shit and to say, "You
Mhm.
know what? You're right. I hear you. I see you. I am sorry. I did the best I
Yes.
could." Not an excuse, but if I, of course, would have known what I know now, I would have changed and done things different. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change how much I love you, how proud I am of you, how much I support you. But I am human, and I'm asking for you to forgive me. I think as the person on the other side of that, you do have a responsibility to take ownership of whatever it is that the person who's trying to estrange from you is calling. But what I see more often than not is that's not going to be good enough. They
That's
just
what I was thinking. Yes.
they can't get past whatever it is that has drawn this line in the sand for them. And that's the part that I feel is so toxic because and here let me make the complete exclusion of abuse. Abuse is never okay. If you've got a physically abusive family member, obviously sexually abusive family member, emotionally, mental abusive, financial, different types of abuse. I understand 100% where that is. coming
And
from
that's what
it.
we're gonna talk about in part 2 is
Yes.
when there is something that, is so unhealthy and toxic, and abuse certainly falls into that, where
Right.
you estrange yourself because it is not healthy for your peace.
Exactly.
This part 1, we're talking about just sort of typical relationships in a
Mhm.
family.
Right.
There are ups and downs, and things are gonna happen, and people are gonna get pissed at each other.
Well, and I think so kind of speaking into that, like sitting on the other side. So I'm the person who's been estranged from. And okay, so let me give you a scenario and see kind of, what your thoughts are on it. So I'm the person, so let's just say that I'm a parent and my child has chosen to estrange themselves from me. And they're citing that a long history of emotional and mental abuse from me that has led to multiple problems in their life that they are struggling to get through. And
Okay.
they contend that it's still ongoing, that there's still things that are happening, that I'm not listening, I'm not hearing them, and that nothing I do is ever right. And so I'm sitting on the other side of that and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh my gosh, like I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to hear them." I think what happens a lot is people get defensive, right?
Mhm.
That's not me. I'm not going to be accused of abuse. I was never abusive. But let me ask you this. What's an alternative to that? What needs to happen in that situation in order to maybe have some chance at reconnecting these two people?
Mhm. So I think the person hearing this, even if that is not their experience, that isn't their perception, they sit with that person and say, I am so sorry that was your experience. I am so sorry that um, things that have occurred over our life together have hurt you.
Hmm.
I would really love to explore that more. I would really appreciate the opportunity to um, attempt to understand your perspective and help us kind of reconnect.
Hmm.
However, if this person is really wanting to cut off because like we kind of identified what I've seen more often than not, someone who's able to just disconnect from someone they've known their whole lives, there's something more going on.
Hmm.
And chances are their communication isn't as healthy as it can be. And
Hmm.
even though that was my response, they're gonna say, "No, too
Yep.
bad. You can't ever make it up.
Hmm.
Um, you're gonna lie," whatever it is, and that estrangement is still going to occur. But I
Agreed.
think on your side, at least that is something you know, and you can say, hey, at least I know I extended this olive branch. I really was willing to sit down with
Hmm.
dad and hear about this. I was really willing to sit down with my daughter and really hear about this.
Hmm.
Um, because that's going to be something you're going to need if this estrangement sticks to help you cope because you've got to be able to still live a life even though this family member isn't in it.
Hmm. Well, and I could not agree more. I think that a lot of times that effort gets met on deaf ears because really the person who's estranging, again, like you said, they're not healthy to begin with. They're looking for someone to be a scapegoat, someone to blame. A lot of times the scapegoat in the family is the one who has boundaries, because those boundaries get violated because they won't move or budge on their boundaries, then that becomes that they're difficult, they're the hard person, they're not willing to compromise, blah, blah, blah. But I think what I see a lot of is the person who's not willing to compromise and do these things is because they have healthy relationships are built on boundaries. So they've put
Yes.
boundaries in place, not
Yes.
not all, sometimes to be an asshole, yes, but not always. A lot of times there's reasons for their boundaries, but until you figure out what that is, but either way, I think a lot of times when people choose to estrange and you're left on the other side going, "What just happened here?" A lot of times there was nothing you could have done right. They had like you said, they had so much going on underneath there that every little move you make isn't gonna be good enough.
That's right.
And you just have to stay strong in that, in your truth, knowing I'm doing the best I can. And in order to be able to truly fully say that, you're right. You have to be able to extend that olive branch, extend that compassion and that empathy to them, whether or not they choose to
With
take it.
boundaries.
Yes, with
Yes.
boundaries, but with
It
whether or
can't
not
be
they choose.
transactional.
Not at all. And whether or not they choose to take it, it's left your perimeter and now it's in theirs. And you mentioned that
Absolutely.
transaction. I see so many relationships that are transactional. And the transactional relationships translate to conditional love. And it's
Yes.
so unhealthy. So not okay.
And the other thing is, when you start having it be about transactions, right? That's how I'm going to get this individual to come over. I'm
Mhm.
going to say, I'm going to tell my daughter, "Hey, I've got all these gifts for you." Um, you are now lowering your standards, your core values of what are healthy relationships. So,
Mhm.
in order to cope with someone saying, "Hey, I don't want anything to do with you anymore," you have to know I've tried in within really healthy boundaries. I've extended an olive branch in a really healthy way. I also know that I can't control this other person. I
Mhm.
know that two opposite things can exist at the same time. This this person in our family isn't here, and we can have a really good celebration.
Yeah.
These things can happen it at the same time. And I
Mhm.
see so many people who just will refuse to have family get-togethers anymore because someone has estranged themselves, or they can't have fun at those events and they're sulking and pouting and crying. um, that isn't healthy either.
Yeah.
There is a place to sit with that sadness and that grief.
Mhm. Mhm.
uh, there's also the ability to enjoy and be grateful for what you are able to have with other
Mhm.
members of your family.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that you made a good point with that because there is that feeling, and it's the grief part of it. The dynamic of the family unit has changed. One person has chosen to remove themselves, and you're right. It takes a little while to adjust to that. But
Yes.
again, you can have those two things at once. You can have space to adjust to it. You can have space to still love and create memories with the family members that are still in the family unit. And you can love someone from afar still. So
Mhm.
being removed from their life doesn't mean that you can't still love them or that you can't still think about them or pray for them or whatever it is that you do. Um, so having all of those things at once, I think, kind of helps too to be able to, in some way, navigate what that looks like. And then there's
Yeah.
also kind of the tricky part of like, what do the boundaries look like if this person chooses to come back in? And that could be a part 3.
That could be a part 3.
Navigating toxic family relationships, when do you choose to estrange? It just it's very complicated.
I think that is going to be a really interesting part 2.
Mhm,
So please come back for part 2 of estrangement, because that's a whole different animal where you're setting a boundary of estrangement because someone is so abusive, so unhealthy and toxic. So
mhm.
we'll hit that one next.
Yes. I think I'm looking forward to that.
What's your lesson after this session?
I think, the biggest thing that sticks out for me is a couple of things. Well, the biggest, I'll say the things. Know your truth. So ground yourself in what you know to be true. Number two is you can have a lot of different things occur at the same time. So you can love someone still from afar if they choose to remove you from their life. You can still enjoy your family and you can still enjoy events and special occasions. Just because they're not there doesn't mean that those things don't have value anymore. So being able to live in that gray area of having a lot of things be true at the same time.
Wonderful. I think those are wonderful lessons. I think for me also, knowing your truth, knowing that I may have screwed up in this. I have apologized. I have made amends. I've made a plan to do better. Knowing I've done that, if that person still does not want a relationship and they want to kind of be out of the family, so to speak, I've
Mhm.
got to grieve that and still find all the joy and love and peace that still exists, and that those things can happen at the same time.
They can. Ah,
Okay. All
all
right. I will
right.
see you for part 2.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, hun.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.